Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. And I've actually been talking to Decoteau Irby, Dr. Decoteau Irby, for like an hour, which kind of used up some of the time. I had to because there was so much I wanted to say. I've been working and preparing for this, unlike almost every interview I've done. This is because it's Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. And I've actually been talking to Decoteau Irby, Dr. Decoteau Irby, for like an hour, which kind of used up some of the time. I had to because there was so much I wanted to say. I've been working and preparing for this, unlike almost every interview I've done. This is because it's so important to me, the work that he does and Stuck Improving, the book that he wrote. Racial equity and school leadership means a lot to me. And that's why I took pages of notes on the book, and I've listened to his music. And he's a creator. He'll tell you what that is. And he's an activist. And he's a musician, and there's so much to unpack. And I have to thank, and I haven't yet, but I'm thanking her now, Nanda Disu from Coriolis. She's a publicist, and that's how Decoteau and I got connected, and I'm so grateful for that. And I could probably make this into a 20-minute, you won't let me, but a 20-minute introduction, because that's how important the work that you do is to me, and it is to all of us. So I'm done with my Johnny Carson monologue, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Decoteau Irby. Little bio, and take it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Calvin, thanks for having me on your show and giving me and other people this platform. I really appreciate it. So just a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Chicago. I describe myself first and foremost as a creator, which is a kind of new title for me. Hopefully we maybe talk about that a little while. I haven't always called myself that. I grew up in South Carolina. I've lived in multiple places. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, where I went to College of Charleston. I've lived in Philadelphia, where I went to Temple University. I also lived at San Francisco. I was at University of San Francisco for a very brief moment. I've also lived in Milwaukee, and now I live in Chicago. And everybody tells me that's a lot of moving, and it is. So, but one of the beautiful things is that I've had the opportunity to live in different areas of the United States and soak in the culture and the customs and the ways that people move in different areas. And so I'm deeply, deeply appreciative and grateful for that. So a little bit about my kind of backstory of how I landed where I'm at. I always kind of say that I'm here kind of by grace and people kind of giving me direction. One of the things I say about myself is I'm pretty coachable. I went to, high school, middle school, had a normal kind of typical upbringing. I lived with my mom and my two sisters, and, I had family all around me. So I always felt like I had the freedom and autonomy to kind of take risk and explore. So just a typical summer day, for example, when I was growing up in South Carolina, was me and my friends. We get on our bikes and we roam around the neighborhood and we drink water out of, people's water fountain, water hoses that we didn't know. That was the kind of community that I grew up in where, if you were drinking out of somebody's water hose, they would come out and just tell you to make sure you wrap it back up when you're done. So I think some of that has really shaped my willingness to kind of roam and move to different places and assume that people are, positive. Assume that I'll have positive experiences in different places that I go. So I went to College of Charleston. I was involved with Black Student Union. I majored in economics. I had a lot of really cool people around me, as particular adults, and in particular, a lot of Black adults. I worked at a research center called Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. And a lot of the folks there encouraged me to go on to graduate school, as well as many of my professors from my econ program. So I moved to Philadelphia, wanted to be in the city because I wanted to study urban studies. I did. I got my master's in geography and urban studies at Temple, and at the time started working with young people and really just, just enjoyed it. It gave me a reason to wake up. It gave me energy. Working with high schoolers and young adults, from ages about 14 to about 22. The older folks were aiming to get their GED, and so I taught GED classes for some years, and I just enjoyed it. And that experience working with young people led me to want to get a PhD in urban education, because I was always concerned with the pattern that I saw where the system was failing students and their families, despite them oftentimes doing everything that they, were told to do. Go to school, be on time, turn in your work, study hard, fill out the financial aid form, all of those things. And then I saw family after family and student after student, things not working out despite the fact that they had done everything that they were asked to do. So that made me very curious and kind of about what I could do to begin to affect change in school systems and the educational system. That's what led me to a PhD. And fast forward through a few universities and a lot of work and publications, and now I'm at University of Illinois at Chicago, where I'm an associate professor in education policy studies. And in addition to all that, I'm a father and a husband. I have two wonderful kids, ages 7 and 9. And I spend a lot of time with them, and we have a lot of fun. They keep me busy.
They do. They do. It's funny. My grandchildren live with us. My son and daughter-in-law live with us until they find a place. So I'm a bit of a custodian to watch and take care of my granddaughter, who's 15 months old. It's intense.
Oh yeah, that age.
It's intense. It's one of the great experiences in life to be able to have that. Usually grandparents, 4 times a year they see the grandkids, but I have that every day, and it's wonderful. And I know what you're saying. To start off, this whole creative thing fascinates me, and I have my notes. It covers such a multitude of things. You're being a creator, and I love that. I love that term. I almost want to plagiarize it, but I won't. But it's a great term. From urban green spaces that you've done, and you will do that with your kids and teaching them about those values. You've done some consulting businesses, Derute. If you want to kind of fill us in on that. I love the Deaky Bug Creative Works.
Yeah.
These are and some of your history and some of the things you've done. Bronzeville, and I mean, so talk a little bit more about being a creator and
Yeah. So like I mentioned, it's a title that I only recently started to use and embrace. So thank you for asking me about it. It kind of forces me to talk about it myself in this way. But I think that it's a fitting kind of way to describe myself, because I've been kind of on a quest and journey to try to figure out, like, how do I describe, what I do? And a lot of landing on the creator is thanks to, Nanda, who is, leads my PR team, who you mentioned. And so, she really started to, say, well, you create a lot of things. And so whether that's a business or gardens, or I love to cook, right? I like to take stuff out of the garden and, transform things and create new recipes. I like to create experiences for people. So for example, I'm the treasurer for my park advisory council here in Chicago. And so park advisory councils are basically these volunteer group of residents who get together and they basically, provide stewardship for a local park. And so the park that's about 2 blocks from my house is called Armstrong Park, and I'm the park advisory council treasurer there. And when I initially came to this neighborhood, we moved to this neighborhood in 2017, the park wasn't a vibrant space. And I didn't, and I always wondered, like, what would it take to create the conditions that makes this a place that, like, people kind of flock to and want to be in and want to bring their children to, and that sort of thing. And so I'll tell you a quick story about the thing that made me really get involved with the Park Advisory Council. Is we had moved here and I took my son to the park, and he was maybe 3 at the time. I'm trying to remember his name. I mean his age at the time, probably about an old 2, young 3, somewhere around there. But we went to the park, we went to the playground. At the time, this was a relatively desolate park. There were, trash strewn all around. Things weren't well taken care of. There was kind of like writing and everything, and a lot of the playground equipment. And adults mostly would hang out on the playground equipment. And so there's one particular time we were there, and he was playing, and there were 2 women, and one of them passed out, right, on the playground. And it's kind of like, okay, what's going on? So we go over, a couple people walk over, we try to check and see what's happening. And I kind of sent my son over to play with some other people while we were checking on this woman, and she, come to find out, she had overdosed right there on the playground. And I was like, wow, right? There's needles and that sort of thing. And so, it really gave me some insight into, okay, I really understand why people don't come to this park. And then my question became is like, what would be required to create a kind of park, a green space that's welcoming and that people want to come to, and that sort of thing. And so that's when I really got involved. And since then, we've just done a tremendous amount to try to make the park a kind of welcoming place. And, I don't know whether this is, I feel some kind of way about this, but now it's in the real estate listings, right? For gentrifying the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? But, part of now, you read real estate listings and it says steps away from beautiful Armstrong Park,
Wow.
So I think that's something, when I think about like being creative. And so I think one of the early things that I did is I wrote an article for a group called Friends of the Park. And I wrote an article about why I got involved and how I really wanted the space to be vibrant and for you to kind of be able to pass the park at any time of day and there's people out there, whether it's older people walking around the track, children playing basketball, and more recently now we're going to be bringing children's and youth baseball and softball to the park because we got a grant to do that. And so that's an example of something that I've been involved in and doing. This a little bit of activism, but I would consider it, a creative undertaking, right?
Yeah.
Trying to remake a space and create a different kind of space with the physical built environment that's already there, so that people have a particular kind of opportunity to have a particular experience. And so that's an example, but I also create, music, I write. And so that's a creative process, writing, even academic articles and books, all of those are creative processes. I've written a children's book. So I just put this umbrella term of creator to all of these different small little things that I'm engaged in that I do. And that was the easiest way to try to, and maybe the most fitting way to try to capture all the things that I do, because I don't consider myself like a green space or park activist. But I do consider myself a person who will see spaces, whether it's a community garden and then figure out how to be creative to create something new and different and enhance what's already there. So that's kind of why I started to call myself a creator. And I think it's a title that kind of fits what I've been doing. And I'm just trying to, embrace it and grow into it even more than, I have, and just say, I create things.
It reminds me of an old Bobby Kennedy quote, you see things and you want to fix it and change it and create. He didn't say create, but that's exactly what you're saying. You see things, you want to make it better. The whole park thing, what a great story. I took a lecture once with this urban, I think he was from Columbia, I forgot his name, but he talked about parks and he talked about how you can see an area like inner city changing when you have parks that are inhabited and used, and when you have people sitting outside in sidewalk restaurants, and that's the revitalization of an urban area. I think his last name was Jackson. It comes to me, but I took that lecture a bunch of years ago. So what you're doing is you're breathing life and this whole creative thing. We'll talk a little bit later about Magical Black Tears, this children's book you wrote, and
Yeah.
how it's going to wind up in a museum. So I know all this stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So you got some good inside
I
information.
do.
Looking forward to talking about it.
Yes, I spent my time. I don't
Yeah.
want to lay any guilt on you, but I spent a lot of time learning about you.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
So, well, it's because your work, your journey it fascinates me, and it's so important. So moving on, a good segue. And by the way, people are going to see your website. It's worth a trip to your website because it's a great website, and you don't even know where to go first. So I went down a list. I clicked on everything and listened to music, and so next on my list is your activism, and you said something very profound. We could talk about it for hours. We don't have the time, but you call yourself your activism is quiet. And
Yeah.
interesting. So let's talk about and I know you did say some of your activism comes from the fact that you're a parent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, quite a
talk about
bit.
your
Yeah.
activism.
Yeah. It's interesting. I do tend to be like very quiet. So I'm involved in a lot of things, and that's why I kind of smiled when you said, "Oh yeah, the book will be moving into this." Um, but yeah, I tend to just be quiet. It's one of the reasons that I, work with, Nanda and her team, because if I didn't have a team to, kind of push me out, I'd be doing a lot of things and, you know, engaging kind of activism, kind of organizing people, whether it's, people around our park, or whether it's advocating for, improvement in schools. And really, I would pretty much just be doing it behind the scenes. And I actually really get a lot of joy and fulfillment from working and doing things behind the scenes, coaching people, strategizing, coming up with ideas. And one of the other things about me is that I actually will put the ideas, I'm the typer or the writer, So, a lot of times I'll sit in a room and we'll be talking to people about strategies and ideas, and it'll just be conversation. And I'm the person that'll pull out the information and organize it so that, people can begin to move forward. I'm the person who will follow up and send text messages and email people to say, hey, when's the next meeting? Maybe we should find a standing meeting date to address this particular issues. So I really take a long-term kind of outlook on the role I play in kind of like advocating and activism. Um, but yeah, it's very much behind the scenes. If you talk to people who are engaged and involved with me, they will certainly say, Decoteau, is involved with this. So, for example, I'm a board member of an organization called Co-op Ed Center here in Chicago, and we had our anniversary party this past weekend here in Chicago, and it's a trip because when people are moving through the room, they'll like my name comes up a lot, which I have a name, Decoteau Irby, that nobody else has. So it's only one Decoteau Irby. It's not like Mike or Mark, And my name comes up a lot. And a lot of times I'll meet people who have heard of me long before I meet them. I'll give you a really quick story. It was a trip one time. This is when I lived in San Francisco. And I had left a nightclub, and I didn't have a car, so I was waiting for the bus outside of the nightclub. And there were some people, how people kind of hang out after the club lets out. So I'm outside and everything, and I'm talking to a group of people. And this is when I had just probably about 6 months after I had moved to San Francisco from Philadelphia, and I'm talking to a group of people. And there's a woman who was like, where are you from? And I was like, oh, XYZ, we're talking. She's like, what's your name? I was like, my name's Decoteau. And she says, oh, I know a Decoteau. And I was just like, really? Like, you know a Decoteau? She was like, yeah, but this guy, he lives in Philly. And I was like, that's me. You know what I'm saying? And she was like, no,
Wow.
that's, and I was like, no, I said, yeah, that's probably me, And so anyway, it was funny because somebody like literally all the way on the other side of the country knew my name from someone who they were working with around some like activism in like blog space, and had heard of me. And so I'm kind of pretty active, but very active behind the scenes and not really kind of like upfront. The reason that I started calling it quiet is that I have a former student and really good friend of mine whose name is James Ock. He started a clothing line called Only with Kings. And one of the parts of his clothing line is called, it has images of like people in space. It has images of like panda bears and all of these things that are like quiet. And it's a clothing line called Quiet Work. And he says that the clothing line was inspired by me because I would be doing things nobody would know, and then all of a sudden, like, a book is out, or there's a grant that's coming to like refurbish baseball diamonds or something, and everybody's like, where did this come from? And he was like, it points back to Decoteau Irby, who's been doing like quiet work in the background to push this and make it happen. So that's kind of where that idea comes from. And again, I think because of my personality, I had a difficult time describing myself as an activist. And, just even now, you could kind of probably tell that it's like hard for it to come off of my tongue. But, I started to say like, okay, yeah, I am very, very active and I do it, but it doesn't look it doesn't look traditional in terms of being out front. It's much more behind the scenes. And so I took the combination of my friend saying that I do quiet work and I'm quiet about things that I do. And, you don't know until it's kind of like almost done. And then took that with the activism and started to just say, this idea of like quiet activism where I'm really in the back. So where I feel good. And I love to see other people shine and give other people the platform and let other people do the talking and to kind of be behind the scenes, like writing up some talking points for them, you know what I mean? So that's what we would do is the meeting before is we come up with the talking points. And then you go out there and you hit all the talking points and make them sound better than I would. And I really get a thrill. I really love seeing that kind of stuff.
I subscribe to that quiet. I'm older and I've learned to take that more of a quiet approach to get the job done. And a lot of times people don't even know that you've jobbed them and you move them because you've done it quietly. And
Right.
And I was in sales and I wasn't overpowering. I was a quiet salesman, but I was #1 in the country when and it's because I did it quietly. So it's exactly, Decoteau, what you're saying. You maybe our species doesn't like noise. Quiet may be a better way. So I think what you're doing, the quiet activism, is brilliant because you're getting the job done.
Yeah.
There's, you could write a book about that. I'm giving you a book title, Quiet.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that is a good title. That's
It's
a
a
good
great
title.
title, and a lot of people can learn. A lot of people can learn a lot about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you read history, when you really start to get into historical books and history texts, you start to get the stories of the people who was behind the scene. But in real time, you don't get a lot of it. You get most of the story of the people who are out front. And,
Correct.
I'm just not out front. So maybe some point in history, I'll be, in the footnotes and the person they're writing about behind the scenes. And I would like that. I'd be happy with that,
Yeah.
because it would accurately characterize the role that I played in a lot of different, wins and some things that didn't win, but it would be accurate.
Okay. I'm a quiet guy too. So moving on, the next chapter to talk about, you're a musician.
Yes.
And I mentioned to you, I listened to some of, went to your website and listened to some of your music, and you have so many role models and so many people you're fans of. Unfortunately for me, I came out of the 60s and I never left the 60s.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm stuck there. And I'm trying to kind of broaden my horizons. My son tries to take me by the hand, and he took me some years ago, 11 years ago, to my first rock concert of all things.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm stuck in folk music.
Right.
Just the way I am, but I know you've got Jimmy down here Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
and Luther, must be Vandross, and
Hmm.
some of your role models. It's funny, I posted a picture of Jimi Hendrix. He, um, I put it on Facebook a bunch of years ago, but it was Jimi Hendrix had picked up an album from Lenny Bruce, the comedian from the 60s, and he was holding the album. And it's funny, I have a bunch of Lenny Bruce albums there, and so I had the same picture that he had, but it was Jimi Hendrix with Lenny Bruce and me with Lenny Bruce, and I threw it up on Facebook because I thought that was kind of cool. But anyway, um, you're amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, self-taught in guitar, and you write music and play. So, talk a little bit about your musical journey and the stuff you're doing now. And you have a band, Dakota Black.
Yes, correct.
So talk about your music work.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just like a music lover, I mean, I think that probably if I would have picked up an instrument and started playing early, I probably would be a musician. That's how much I love it. I mean, they say, I'm a working class. I grew up in a very working class household, right? Working class family, working class community. So, our thing was like, we didn't have really people we had artists, but, it was always a side gig. It wasn't like you can do art and think of yourself as like an artist. Like we're very, very much so a working class family. And so I took those working class values with me. But I would say that if I, were a part of a different class or a different group, I think I would probably be a musician. That's how much I love music. So I am self-taught. I tried to teach myself guitar several times, and finally, I was about 22, 23 when I really it started to stick. I had tried several times before. I never took any lessons. I never had an instrument in my hand before I tried to pick up a guitar a few times. And I started about 23, 24, teaching myself. This was around the time that YouTube came out, and YouTube was my teacher, right? So I got YouTube, and I started to teach myself watching YouTube videos. So I have a bunch of YouTube people to thank for the basics. And then other than that, just listening and trying to get a sense of like of bands that I love, Radiohead. Of course, you mentioned Jimi Hendrix. Wes Montgomery was a huge influence. And if I back up, I was influenced by all of those folks really during my college years. I think I made one of the things that I'm appreciative about that I did in undergrad is that, when you move into the dorms, you have an option of like, whether you wanted to choose someone with the same religion, same race, so on and so forth. And because I had grew up in a neighborhood where I had a lot of, Black folks, and then my high school experience was more racially diverse and integrated. But I had never really spent like time living with someone who was different. And so I specifically, in my college application, asked to have roommates that were like a different race. And so I did, and it was really cool because it became one of the things that really tied me and both of my roommates together was like this exchange of music. And so it was really a time where like my musical palette expanded and was became more attuned to different kinds of sounds and different kinds of scales and chord progressions than what I was used to, because I grew up off of gospel, R&B, blues, and hip hop. That was it, right? Not even really jazz. I really wasn't even in the jazz. I didn't grow up in a jazz household. So it really just kind of expanded my musical horizons. And in college, I was in a band called Beatbox Dub. I was the MC for the band. Before that, I made music with the group in high school that I called Sound Shop, and it was me and one of my buddies named Tommy, and we made a lot of music and that sort of thing. But when I was in college, I remember the frustration that I would feel because not playing an instrument, I couldn't translate musical ideas to the people in the band.
Wow.
And that was so frustrating to me because I would have an idea of something that I wanted to hear, a sound that I wanted to hear, a rhythm that I wanted, so on and so forth. But because I didn't play instruments, I couldn't translate it. And I just didn't have the language. I couldn't. And so we made music that I liked, but it was never precise in terms of like the ideas that were in my head.
Wow.
And so, you know, once I started teaching myself guitar, I started being able to make the music that that was in my head, right? I could find the right notes and find, you know, the right melodies and the chord progressions that like I had in my head. And I started to be able to kind of more accurately translate the sounds that I heard and the rhythms that I heard and put together something that might have like come to me, you know, in my mind. And so that's kind of what I started off. I recorded my first project called The Contagious Spring by myself with one other person named James Murphy, and it was really a good time. It was dope. You know, I kind of played mostly all of the instruments. I did drum programming, a little bit of live percussion, and he's a trained kind of person who writes music, so he came over the top and produced it and made it all sound good. And he helped me learn how to, you know, create smooth transitions into bridges and to add some interest and kind of like make the music move. So it wasn't kind of, I came from a hip hop tradition where the beat stayed the same and the tempo stayed the same. And so he really helped push me to start thinking more about changing the tempo, changing the beats from, you know, a 4/4 to a 3/4, you know, transitioning into chords, going from a major progression to a minor progression, so on and so forth. So I learned a lot of that stuff from him, released a project, met some people because of the project who they heard it and they were just like, we would love to play these songs with you. And that's when I formed the band Dakota Black with my buddy John Laws, who's on drums. And then we've had a rotation of mostly self-taught musicians that come in and out of the band. So sometimes we have 5 pieces, sometimes we have 3 pieces, sometimes we have 4, sometimes we have 6. It just kind of depends on what stage the band is in. But we play the same, you know, kind of songs, and I'm always writing new material. My second project called Without You, which is, I believe, the one that you kind of listened to some of the songs on. That particular project, I actually recorded that in my basement with all of my buddies, right? At the time I lived in Milwaukee, we would play music every Friday night. And, you know, we just started having these songs that we would play. And then we just, and I would say, hey, you know, come over. We're just going to work on keys, or we're just going to work on drums. And so I pretty much produced and put that whole project together. It's an exciting project. I love it. I love the songs. The musicianship of people is like really good. And again, I think one of the things that I appreciate about myself is willing to kind of like put the songs out there, right? So I'm the person who will write the stuff down, give people the template, and then tell them, don't play this how I've written it, put your own thing onto it. And then I kind of sit back and it gets way better than I ever could have imagined. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my approach. And so that's kind of what you hear in that project. And I've been writing. I put down a guitar for several years, and then during the pandemic, I started back working on music again and writing songs. And so it's exciting. And I write about a bunch of different topics, a lot of love songs, a lot of songs about you know, freedom and liberation, Black liberation, you know, political songs. So it's kind of all over the place. But I'm just influenced by so many different artists and genres that I try to fit it all into the music. Yep. That was a long explanation. You can tell I'm excited about it.
Yeah, you sure are. And again, I listened to a few things last night, and it kind of blew me away. Well, because I'm not, I like when you can hear words and not drowned out by, you know, heavy metal. And to me, words are, I'm a writer, so words are very important. Sometimes when I find the right word for something, it makes my whole day. Just one word plugged into the right situation. It's so being able to listen to your words, to me, and with music in the background, that's just because I'm an old guy, I guess. You know, I came out of Elvis Presley,
Right.
that world. But anyway, so people can find the music right on your website.
Yeah.
And you also can sign up for a newsletter, which I did, just to kind of stay on top of things. So, you know, it's funny. There was a TV show way, way, way before your time called This Is Your Life. in the 50s. I'm talking way before your time. But and I kind of think of that now. This is your life. So in all the things you've talked about so far, you're also a consultant.
Mhm.
And you started this consulting company, Derute. Talk a little bit about some of the consultant work you do.
Yeah, yeah. So we started Derute. I started Derute with four other people, Black women in particular, back in 2013. And the reason that we started Derute is that we realized this is a cooperative. I should mention that, which is one of the things that that's the creator piece, right? So I can't even make an organization like everybody else makes an organization. I have to make it way more complicated by making it a cooperative. But so the five of us started Derute Consulting Cooperative, and basically we started it because we saw a lot of areas where we were being asked, or where we could and probably should be asked to provide, organizational development, leadership coaching, and different organizations to help, make the organizations better places for Black children and families in particular. And so what we did is basically we, would sometimes get like a request for proposals from like a nonprofit organization, and they say, we're looking for somebody to help lead us on issues of racial equity over the next 6 months or a year. And all of us would get the, same call. Like they would email all of us. And so we were just like, we kind of talked amongst ourselves and we're like, we should just collaborate and do it together because you have a expertise in this and I have expertise in this, and we'd be better as a team as opposed to working independently. And so that's how we kind of formed. Our mission is to support organizations and groups that are committed to Black and Brown communities, and basically we help with improving their organizations, and helping them enact their commitments to racial equity. So we work with a lot of different groups. We end up, because most of us in the cooperative are trained as researchers. There's 9 of us now. Most of us are formally trained as researchers, and so we do end up doing a lot of evaluation work, participatory approaches to evaluation, and a lot of kind of organizational and leadership development. So that's kind of what we do. We work with churches, municipal agencies, nonprofits, community groups. They basically will reach out to us and say, look, we have, for example, schools would say, look, our, Black students and families aren't as engaged as we want them to be. What can, as an organization, we do to earn their trust and engagement at XYZ? We'll go in, we'll work with that organization to help them address that particular issue. And so that's what we're doing. We've been doing it since 2013.
Right.
Yeah, and it's fun, right? And it's cool because it's one of those things that, we committed to, and it's moving along, it's thriving, and it's healthy. And yeah, it's a way to kind of like move the work forward, in a way that allows us to, be compensated, but also, kind of formalizes a lot of the informal stuff that we were previously doing anyway.
Okay. And you're working with women in this case.
Yeah, well, there's two men in the group, but mostly most of our members are women. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. If I were to pick out some commonality, I'm on the advisory committee of the Women's Health Institute at Rutgers Robert Johnson Medical School.
Mm.
And that's a long story because of my hat, long story. But one of the great things that I've ever done was to work with women. We took a picture after a lecture. It was really funny. There were 75 students, interns, professors, women. And there was one guy sitting on a chair in front of all those 75 women. It was me.
That sounds about like me. It's always been like that for me. It's always been like that for me.
It's great.
I get pictures. Someone on Facebook posted an old picture from middle school, and it was like, 10 girls in the picture, and then it was me down at the bottom like this. Right off to the side, like, right. Hey, that's what it's been, it's all good,
It is all good. By the way, it was transformative in my life to have done that 4 years ago, and I'm actively involved. It's changed the whole course of my life and priorities and the people that I've interviewed. and the things that I concentrate on, some of the things that I concentrate on, it's an awareness. We're soon going to get to an awareness. Real quick, some of your associate professor at the University of Illinois. Some of the, what is your course that you teach?
Yeah, so I teach in my department is educational policy studies, and I teach courses on organizational leadership and organizational change in particular, how to drive change in organizations. And those are kind of like the main classes. I also teach a class on instructional leadership, and then I teach a doctoral course on urban education, and students from all different departments take that particular course.
Okay.
You know, at the university, I'm also the director of our Call Me Mr. initiative, which is a initiative that is headquartered at Clemson University, but they have about 40 sites around the country. We're one of those. And I'm the director of that initiative. And the mission of it is to increase the diversity of the teaching profession by recruiting and encouraging males of color to go into elementary school teaching. And so that's something I've been doing since 2018. This past year in 2022, May of 2022, we graduated our first 3 graduates from that program, and now we have 16 enrolled. And you know, it's a journey and it's fun. One of the reasons that I'm so committed to that initiative is that I went to College of Charleston off of a full scholarship, and I understand how much of a huge impact that made on, you know, my life trajectory and for everybody around me, from family, and you know, just being the first person to graduate from a 4-year college just made a huge ripple effect in our family. So yeah, so professor, you know, associate professor there, and I do all the typical stuff like attend a lot of meetings and respond to a lot of emails and review for journals and that sort of thing. I'm also very involved with the American Educational Research Association and several other associations. So that's my typical day job at University of Illinois at Chicago.
Intense. Yeah, you just said something really interesting. We don't have the time to really delve into it, but like I said, I'm aware, and I pulled out this article 3 years ago from Brookings. For better student outcomes, hire more Black teachers. And I've had this for 3 years. And my point is I'm aware. Awareness, right. How important this is, which is a great segue to talk about stuck improving, and you're going to talk about that. Right before we do that, one quick question off topic. It's a one-word answer. You don't have to answer it, but it's kind of cool, I think. So here goes. Excluding family or friends, Decoteau. Somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with. You could be a couple people. There's no rules here.
Frederick Douglass immediately comes to mind. I think that's because you excluded family and friends. So I would say Frederick Douglass. I mean, I think it seems like an obvious would be Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
But I think Frederick Douglass would probably be the person.
Funny, if you would ask me that now that I have a whole list, John Lewis, although I did spend time with him, and I would have loved to have spent some time with Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh yeah,
because her quote is one of my favorite quotes in the history of mankind. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
That is about as powerful a quote as there is. But anyway, that's so moving on. Let's talk about stuck improving. I took notes. People should know I got pages of notes here. And then I finally stopped because it's so intense. Who'd you write this for? And talk a little bit about the history and what you're trying to accomplish here. And then I have a couple minor little questions. But for me, reading this, my takeaway and what I've read is the depths of racism and
Mm,
how it hurts the educational process. And our leaders and our educators should be better educated to know about these things and how it hurts the educational process. And if we have a better educated world, we'll be a better world.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you, and thank you for reading it. It was a I didn't know, when I started what this book would end up being like, and it stems from a research project that I did at a school that I call Central Waters in the book. And I wrote it for for educators specifically, and professionals, people who work in schools that are similar to Central Waters, places where um, predominantly white educators, but also Black educators are struggling to figure out how to support Black children and brown children in schools. That's who it's for. And it's not a prescriptive book where I tell people I provide a solution. Really, what I hope to do with this book is to convey, as you mentioned, the kind of complexity, the depths of the problems and the complexities and challenges associated with trying to unravel the ways that racism is interwoven into our society, and especially the ways it's interwoven into everything that happens in schools. And so I really wanted folks to understand that. The argument that I make is that as well-intentioned and as much as we want to, or we espouse or say we want to improve schools and make sure that Black and brown children have opportunities to learn, and by extension, white students will have better opportunities to learn too, that our schools are not set up, they're not set up for that kind of improvement to actually happen. And so the core argument that I make is that schools don't have the capacity to actually do what policymakers want them to do, right? And so in order to create more expansive learning opportunities for Black and brown children who are in a rapidly increasing population in US public schools, that we really need to pay more attention to the organizational leadership and the conditions that exist in schools, and we need to improve conditions. And one of the reasons that I make this argument is that, even if I go back to the example at the top of the segment where I talked about like the conditions of the park, there's something to say about changing the conditions of an environment that creates different possibilities and opportunities for people to behave, act, learn, be different in a particular space. And so what I argue is that if we don't focus on creating different conditions in schools, that even if we try to, get people to thrive in those schools, they're not going to thrive in the schools, right? If you can't play, if the hoop is bent at the basketball court, the game is not going to be what it could be if the court is, in good condition. And so I really try to focus on this idea of organizational capacity for improvement, and really try to lay out in the book the organizational things, the organizational changes that this particular school community that I studied for 7 years made to create a different set of conditions for themselves. And so the book is catered to educators, but I've been, blessed and appreciative that people beyond education have, the book has resonated with people far beyond just the educators who I wrote it for. So yeah, I'm like, people will read it and they're just like, I had a child or I had a similar experience. And so it's resonating in that kind of way. And so that's something that is definitely was not expected. I thought that this would be people who work in schools who would appreciate this book the most, but it's been a powerful experience to understand how many people outside of that kind of core audience have appreciated the book.
It raised my consciousness. I understand the depths of racism. That's just who I am. But in reading this, Central Waters, and just a couple of anecdotes you had put in there, about the student, the Black student who was the recipient of a bad word, and he told the assistant principal, and the assistant principal did nothing with it. So this was an incident that upset this student, which will affect his learning and his experience, and nothing was done because it's racism. And then there's the student waiting in line in the lunchroom, the cafeteria, the black student, and the two white students in front of him, and he gets up to the woman who's doling out the meals, and she closes the line. That's the depths of racism. Even those things affect a child's learning in that kind of environment. And this is contemporary times here.
Yeah,
That's the depths of racism.
Right. And one of the things that I really, I appreciate you bringing up those examples. And I really tried to fill the book with a lot of those kind of examples. And, the language that I use is like, mundane, everyday racism, like not big,
Right.
a big thing that happens that makes CNN. But if what I observed and learned through being embedded as a researcher in the school community, for a period of 5 years, is that the everyday kind of like small things. And they're happening, but they compound from kindergarten, through life, really, right? These small little things that are happening, all the time, and are really chipping away at people's sense of themselves and sense of possibility and belief that people are good and those sorts of things. All of those kind of like little small experiences, they compound over time. And that's what I really wanted to convey. I think I wrote something going back to this idea of quiet, is that I wanted to write the book in a way that was kind of quiet, that took readers into the kind of everyday kind of conversations. So I recount conversations that I had with people and things that I observed, students' experiences, things that were said. And they're quiet things that, I call them quiet because, like, if I wasn't reporting in this book, like, the people who experienced it would know, but nobody else would know what happened in the cafeteria line, right? People just wouldn't know. So it's just these quiet experiences that people have, and they hold them with them. And I wanted to illuminate those to help people understand that when these seemingly small experiences happen thousands of times over the course of someone's life, it's how we end up with a society where I don't want to live next to that person. This person doesn't want to live next to that person, and so on and so forth, because these things have been just compounding over time. And so, in a way, I write that I didn't want to write a book about a big triggering event that happened, but to write about something that kind of, and I think the reason that I chose that is that when these big events happen, you can say, that happened in Ferguson, that happened in, St. Louis, that happened in, Minneapolis. But the stuff that I write about in this book, what people have been telling me since I released it is, they would literally say that I felt like I was reading about my school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. How are we on time? Because I know you have to. We're okay?
Good.
A couple more minutes?
I can definitely do it till about 10:15-ish or so.
Okay, fine, perfect. I don't because the truth is we could go here for hours.
Yeah.
Especially on this and the things I observed. There was a thing in the news. There was a children's amusement park. I forgot which one it is, and I probably wouldn't have mentioned it anyway, but there were figures, child figures, and they were walking, saying hello to children, and when they saw these two figures, I forget what, it's not important, but when they saw these two black children, they walked away and didn't.
I did see that on social media. Yeah. Disney or some theme park or something.
Something big.
Something big.
And they walked away.
Yeah, I remember that.
And this is it's a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when enough already. We've got the planet. We have 40,000 species of animals that are going to be extinct soon. We've got the planet, which we're losing, and you're worried about you won't go say hello to a child. I mean, are you kidding me?
Right. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? It's there was a great movie with Cher and Nicolas Cage called Moonstruck. She slaps him in the face, It says snap out of it. One of the great scenes. It's just like you
Mhm.
want to slap people, snap out of it.
Yeah,
Get a life.
yeah,
You know, we're just one species. That's why anyway, I go off on my so changing so you wrote Magical Black Tears, a protest story, a children's
yes,
book, and what I read is it's going to be part of an exhibit coming up in the museum next year.
yes, yes. So you did some digging. That was you did
I
some
did.
digging.
I did digging.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, so the Magical Black Tears, I have a, it's here. Magical Black Tears, a protest story. It's a children's picture book. Um, and it's about two children who discovered the magical power of people who are fighting for everyday, everyday people who are fighting for justice. And so the premise of the story is that there's these two children, they're outside playing. Their mother calls them in, something's happening in the neighborhood. The children are curious about what's happening. Um, tell, what's going on. Their parents, being parents, trying to be protective, say, don't worry about it, stay in the house, go to sleep, it'll be over in the morning. So the children is just like, we want to know what's going on, right? They're looking out the window, they see smoke, they see, um, they hear sirens. So when they're put to bed that evening, the kids get up, they go outside, and they discover what's going on. And like I said, in that process, they discover the magic of people who are fighting for racial justice. And I'll leave it there. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a book that actually came to me in a dream back in 2016. So at the time in 2016, there was a police involved shooting in the city of Milwaukee where I lived at the time. And I just had a dream about it. It was a very vivid dream. It had words, it had sounds, it had color. It woke me up. I got up, I sketched out. Um, it was so vivid. I
Wow.
sketched it out,
Wow.
and I showed it to a couple of my colleagues in the cooperative and said, this is a dream I had, and they were just like, this would be an amazing book, right?
Wow.
Uh, and I said, yeah, it would be. We kind of talked about it and didn't do anything with it. It literally just sat until George Floyd was killed. And we were here in Chicago, and my two little children saw the smoke. They heard the sirens. There was no way we could mask or hide, what was happening from them. And I decided during that time that it was the time to actually finish this book that had came to me in a dream almost 5 years earlier.
Wow.
And so I finished up the book, and I really felt compelled to write it because I felt in a way, not quite, almost on the borderline of helpless in terms of being able to know what to do or have a resource to talk with my children about what was happening in the streets. They saw it on TV and everything, and I really wanted to talk with them, but I didn't have a resource. And a lot of people didn't have a resource. And I was like, well, I'm a pretty creative guy. I'm pretty open. I talk with my family. I'm an educator, so on and so forth. If I'm having a difficult time talking to my children about it, then this
Wow.
probably be a useful resource for folks. And so that's the background of the book. And since then, my colleagues and I at Derute are in the process of developing. We decided we wanted to develop a children's museum exhibition. It's
Wow.
called the Magical Black Tears Experience.
Wow.
In the museum world, they say every exhibition has a big idea. The big idea of the Magical Black Tears Experience exhibition is that there is the direct action and protest creates a more racially just world. And so the exhibition experience will be an opportunity for children to engage in independent learning and play about direct action and protest and what direct action is, from sit-ins to letter campaigns to hitting the streets. They'll have things like a sign making station. So you go to the science museums and you get to make like a rocket. Well, they'll get to make bullhorns.
Uh-huh.
They'll be making protest signs.
cool.
And they'll have like another station, for example, where they, you know, they're on a little stage, they have a lectern, and they can like write and deliver a speech, and it'll be kind of recorded. And so we have a bunch of things that give children opportunities to learn about what it means to be engaged in a political process through direct action and protest. And so it's a fun exhibition. You know, it kind of fills the space between going to children's museums, and every children's museum has the astronauts, so they can pretend to be astronauts and go to space. They can pretend to be farmers, so they can like pretend to milk the cows. They can put on a farm vest. They can become a firefighter. They can put on a helmet. They can do all those things. And I said, why not create an opportunity for children to pretend and to play and imagine themselves as people who are engaged in a political process? And so that's what the exhibition does. You know, it has like, you know, they get to have little protest signs. They get to use bullhorns. They get to stand behind the lectern and make a speech. They get to pretend to be first responders. All of these different kinds of things that we should be doing, I think, in children's museums and in children's spaces to honor all of the people who have fought to make our society more racially just. And in most museums, children don't have the opportunity to explore that.
Well, this is great.
Yeah.
Really, to start them at such a young age to be aware, politically aware, socially aware.
Right.
Great stuff.
It's fun. You know, there's a puppet show component where, you know, we're using puppets to teach them, you know, like what is direct action. And the puppet show section is really exciting because we don't resolve the problems that the puppets encounter. The puppets have different personalities. So there's one puppet who's like, let's burn everything down, right? There's another puppet that's like, we should do a letter writing campaign. There's another puppet that says we should pray, right? So we give them these scenarios, and so the puppets then give these different perspectives on the scenarios, and then leave it up to the children to kind of explore and wrestle with the ethics of particular approaches and that sort of thing. So because we wanted to be independent, we want them to really kind of explore and give, you know, children an opportunity to think about, like what's the implications of burning it down? What's the implications of just writing a letter? What's the implications of doing nothing at all, and so on and so forth. So it's really exciting. Really child-centered. This is my first time doing something like this. We have great partners or collaborators who we aren't quite at the collaboration where we're announcing everything yet, but we will be within the next 2 months ready to announce the collaboration. So if people follow me on social media, we'll be announcing those by the top of the year. So it's very, very exciting.
That's great. I have to re-follow you. I'll send, just to keep on top of this, because I think it's kind of pioneering to do this kind of a, you know, I don't know how often it's done, but to bring kids awareness, socially, politically. I'll follow it because I think it's great stuff. Really great.
Thank you.
My wife was an educator for 35 years, starting out in Brooklyn, New York. You heard of Brooklyn?
Yes, I have. My children want to go there. They feel like it's the best place on earth because people from Brooklyn tell everybody it's the best place on earth, you know?
Yeah, it is a very special place. And it's constantly undergoing such sociological change. It's pretty cool. Anyway, like I said, we can go on, but the last thing I want to ask you, is you invent your career every 7 years. It's a theory of yours to reinvent yourself after. Talk about that.
Yeah. So you know, thank you for the question, because this is a conversation I've had in private with people, you know, friends and colleagues and stuff, to kind of help them understand kind of how I see the patterns of kind of like my life unfold. And so, you know, how most people celebrate 10 years old, you know, 20, 30, and most people follow kind of like, you know, a decade pattern of, you know, life. And what I found is that my life really kind of revolves around 7, right? So my younger sister was born when I was 7. We moved to a new town when I was 14. Wow. 21 is when I was in college and XYZ, applying to graduate school. I moved to Philadelphia when I was 22. So it's not always right on 7, but it's close to it. So I moved to Philadelphia when I was 22 to go to graduate school. I finished up, I was wrapping up my PhD at 28. So I just saw all of these kind of like, and then I had my first child, and then my son was born between 28 and 35. And, you know, now I'm like, and at 35, I took a new job at UIC, from University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And then at 36, moved to Chicago. And so, you know, here I am now, I'm 42 and trying to do some things now to, you know, give myself something new, which a lot of it is talking more and being more public and, you know, like talking with you and having these conversations, which is something that in the past I would not have done and that I would never do. And so, you know, I talked to people about really understanding, once I reached the understanding of this idea that a lot of major life events for me revolve around this pattern of 7 every 7 years, it really helped me this go around be much more intentional about, I knew it was coming, right? I knew it was coming. Everybody else wants to celebrate my 40th birthday. I'm like, really the time for me to be reflective and think is like around 42. That 42 year, 42 going into 43 is really the sweet spot year that I found. It just so happens that, like, you know, once I get to 49, 50, you know, my children will be leaving the house. So I just see this pattern of 7. So I think the important thing about it is that it's given me the opportunity to really begin to understand and think about my life and the transitions in my life in a different way. And also importantly, to give myself the permission, because I saw the pattern, I realized the pattern that something's going to happen every 7 years, right? I'm going to move, something's going to happen every 7 years. And so because I started to realize that pattern, I try to give myself now the permission to do something new, to reinvent, to push, to grow, to expand when I'm approaching that 7 mark. And so part of what I'm doing now, you know, my book, Stuck Improving, my first single author book came out, you know, last year, you know, when I was, you know, during the 7 year. And I was like, you know, what am I going to do differently? I had a book that came out before that, and, you know, I wrote it, and it, you know, a lot of people didn't read it. I didn't talk about it. I didn't promote it, which is my personality. And so when I wrote Stuck Improving and realizing I was in that 7th year, I was like, what can I do differently? Right. To kind of reinvent, to give myself the opportunity to be more expansive and to grow, because I know I'm in this kind of like season of change and transition. And so as opposed to it being something like a big move, typically I've had a big move every time. And I felt this kind of like compulsion to kind of like, I need to do something. I was like, well, you know, what does it look like to make a big move where I'm at? Because I knew it was coming. And so, yeah, so it's just feeling a kind of like restlessness once I hit these 7 marks. And so a lot of me getting out, talking, having conversation with people like you, Calvin, is one of the things that I'm trying to do to create a different set of conditions for myself so that I can have a different set of experiences and open up new possibilities that didn't exist before I decided to, you know, have conversations with people like you. So that's kind of my theory of 7, my kind of personal theory of 7. And, you know, I settle into whatever this is. And then when I start to get close to, you know, 48, 49-ish, I'll start thinking about, okay, what's next? You know, so that's my theory. And when I share it with people, you know, they say, I feel like I need to figure out what mine is. Is it 5 years? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 10? If I look back at my life, what are the patterns that are revealed if I think about, you know, big things like when I've moved? And so I tend to have these conversations with people and say, you know, do you notice a pattern? Do you notice a pattern related to your children or to your relationships or to your career? What's that pattern? If you can understand and figure out that pattern, what might that mean for how you move forward and create new possibilities for yourself?
And it's so exciting to think of those new possibilities. You know, I'm a little bit of a poster boy for change. You know, I went from selling eyeglasses to writing a novel to becoming a journalist, a broadcaster. I had a cable TV talk show.
Yeah.
And I did all of this by the way, I'm gonna make you feel really good. I did all these changes, becoming a professor, a teacher at Rutgers, lecturer, at 73. So I did all
Mhm.
these things after I turned 65.
Right.
The good news, Dakota, is it's never ending, the
Yeah.
changes that you can make. So we're gonna kind of break this because you have to teach. And I can't thank you enough for your time and spending this time with me, not being quiet, um, you know, and I'm officially inviting you to you can come back with your band. You can
Thank
come
you.
back in any shape, way, or form because I'm here.
That'd
And
be
this
awesome. Thank
great
you.
chemistry and I'm so aboard the things, I'm so aboard, and it's been part of who I am for a long time. And I thank Nanda. Uh, uh, she's been a great friend. I never met her, but she's been a great friend in introducing us. So don't leave. We're gonna sign up, but thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.